You're walking through a medieval portrait gallery and something feels deeply wrong. There's a wealthy merchant's family from the 1400s. The father stands dignified in his doublet and hose. The mother wears an elaborate headdress. And their 7-year-old son? He's dressed in a tiny version of his father's outfit, holding a miniature sword, his face bearing the exact same solemn expression as dad closing a business deal. The kid looks like his father, just smaller. Your first thought might be that medieval painters were terrible at depicting children, but this wasn't bad art. This was accurate reporting. Medieval society genuinely saw children as small adults who just needed to grow bigger and gain experience. The idea that kids are fundamentally different beings requiring special treatment, that would have seemed completely bizarre to our merchant friend. Today's children have their own rooms, their own clothes, their own entertainment, their own food. We protect them from adult conversations. We create elaborate fantasies about Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. We spend fortunes on toys designed specifically for different age groups. The entire concept of childhood innocence, that kids should be shielded from the harsh realities of adult life, feels natural to us, inevitable even. But for most of human history, once you hit about 7 years old, you were basically a junior member of adult society. You worked alongside grown-ups, learned trades through apprenticeships, heard the same stories, watched the same entertainment. Sure, you didn't get married as a 7-year-old, but teenage marriages among the wealthy were common for political and economic reasons. Understanding how we invented childhood reveals something profound about reality itself. All those things we take for granted, the schools, the toys, the entire billion-dollar industry built around the idea that kids are special, this all emerged from specific historical circumstances, and those circumstances, they're more fragile than we think. Philippe Ariès changed everything we thought we knew about childhood. This French historian published a book in 1960 that sparked fierce academic debate. Centuries of childhood made this audacious claim: childhood, as we understand it today, simply didn't exist before the 1600s. Ariès had been studying medieval art when he noticed something odd. Kids in paintings from the 1200s and 1300s didn't look like kids. They had adult faces stuck on small bodies, same clothes as adults, just sized down, same objects, same gestures, same serious expressions. At first, other historians basically patted him on the head and said, "Philippe, medieval painters were just bad at drawing children." But Ariès wasn't having it. He dug deeper. Furniture, gravestones, school records, legal documents. What he found was a society that made virtually no distinction between children and adults once you reach 7. A medieval 7-year-old's day went like this. You wake up and work alongside adults in the fields or workshops. You drink wine because water will literally kill you. You hear the same stories, often incredibly crude ones, watch the same entertainments, join the same festivals. While some toys existed for children, they were simple things like dolls and hoops, nothing like the elaborate age-specific products we see today. And this part would horrify modern parents. Medieval children were exposed to everything: sex, violence, death. No attempt at protection whatsoever. They slept in the same beds as adults, witnessed births and deaths, heard jokes that would make a sailor blush. The idea that children needed shielding from adult realities was completely foreign. Now, before you start thinking medieval parents were monsters, Ariès realized something crucial. They weren't heartless. They loved their children. They just loved them differently. Love, it turns out, isn't some universal constant. The way we express care, what we consider protective, even the emotions we feel toward kids, all of this gets shaped by culture. Medieval parents faced a nightmare we can barely imagine: infant mortality rates that would devastate us today. Many babies died in their first years. In this context, emotional distance wasn't cruelty, it was psychological survival. Parents often didn't even name newborns right away, calling them "it" until they showed signs of making it. When a child died, they'd sometimes give the next baby the same name. This wasn't callousness. This was humans adapting to circumstances that would break us. So, what changed everything? The transformation didn't happen overnight. Ariès spotted the first hints in 13th century religious art, where baby Jesus started actually looking like a baby instead of a tiny adult. But the real shift began in the Renaissance, picked up speed in the 1600s, and absolutely exploded in the 1700s and 1800s. The key was economics. As Europe moved from farming to commerce, families stopped needing children as workers. In fact, kids became an economic burden rather than an asset. This created space for something completely new, a relationship between adults and children based on emotional attachment rather than economic utility. The Protestant Reformation turbocharged this change. Protestant theology emphasized individual salvation, which required literacy to read the Bible. Suddenly, educating children became a religious duty. Schools multiplied, creating for the first time in history large groups of people segregated by age rather than class or occupation. But the real mastermind behind modern childhood was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His 1762 book, Émile, fundamentally challenged existing beliefs about human nature. Children were naturally good and needed protection from corrupting adult society. God makes all things good, Rousseau wrote. Man meddles with them and they become evil. This was revolutionary. For centuries, Christian doctrine taught that children were born sinful and needed the evil beaten out of them. Rousseau completely flipped this script, arguing that children were born innocent and needed protection from adult corruption. Rousseau's ideas spread like wildfire through educated Europe and America. Suddenly, childhood wasn't just a biological phase, it was a moral category. Children weren't smaller humans, they were better humans, uncorrupted by the compromises and hypocrisies of adult life. The Industrial Revolution sealed the deal. As work moved from farms and homes to factories, children got physically separated from adult labor. Child labor laws, initially passed to protect factory owners from cheap competition, gradually evolved into genuine protection for children. By the 1800s, middle-class kids in Europe and America lived lives we'd recognize: school, toys, special clothes, complete shielding from adult concerns. But here's the fascinating part. This transformation was never complete or universal. Even as middle classes were inventing modern childhood, working-class children kept laboring in factories, mines, and mills. Colonial children in Africa, Asia, and the Americas got subjected to European labor systems that made zero allowance for childhood innocence. The protected childhood we think of as natural and universal was actually the privilege of a specific class in specific societies at a specific moment in history. This leads us to an uncomfortable realization. Our entire concept of childhood is built on economic inequality and cultural imperialism. Rousseau's innocent child was only possible because other children, working-class kids, colonial kids, enslaved kids, were doing the labor that supported the economy. This contradiction persists today. We've exported protected childhood globally through international law and humanitarian organizations. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child enshrines childhood innocence as a universal human right, but millions of children worldwide still work in factories, fields, and mines producing goods that support the protected childhoods of middle-class kids in wealthy countries. There's another layer Ariès couldn't have seen coming: the commercialization of childhood. Once society accepted that children were different from adults, entrepreneurs realized they could sell to that difference. Toys, children's books, breakfast cereals, entire economic sectors now depend on maintaining the fiction that children have fundamentally different needs from adults. Consider this. The global toy industry is worth over $100 billion annually, but toys as objects designed specifically for children's play didn't exist before the 1700s. Medieval children played with the same objects adults used: sticks, stones, scraps of cloth. The idea that children need special objects designed just for them is a modern invention serving economic interests as much as developmental ones. This commercialization has created what scholars call the institutionalization of childhood. Today's children live in a world designed specifically for them: playgrounds, Happy Meals, Disney movies. But this world is also segregation. Children are separated from adult society more completely than ever in history. They have their own spaces, entertainment, food, clothes. We've created a kind of benevolent apartheid based on age. The psychological effects are profound. Modern children often report feeling disconnected from the adult world, uncertain about their place in society, anxious about transitioning to adulthood. Medieval children, for all their hardships, never experienced this existential confusion. They knew exactly where they fit because they were part of the world from the beginning. Some critics argue we've swung too far. Child psychologist John Holt argued that modern childhood has become a prison where children are denied agency in the name of protection. The innocence we celebrate, Holt suggested, is actually ignorance that leaves children unprepared for adult realities. Sometimes I wonder if childhood is a social construction, if how we treat children isn't natural or inevitable, but the product of specific historical circumstances, then it can change again. And it is changing. Digital technology is eroding the boundaries between adult and child knowledge that took centuries to establish. Children today access information that previous generations of adults worked hard to hide from them. The protected innocence of childhood is becoming impossible to maintain. Maybe that's not entirely bad. The medieval child who worked alongside adults, who faced the world without illusions, who was treated as a capable society member rather than a fragile creature needing protection, that child had something we've lost. They had agency, purpose, a clear place in the world. Our invented childhood, for all its benefits, may have created as many problems as it solved. We can't go back, that world is gone. But we can ask, what comes next? Can we create something that gives children both protection and agency, both safety and purpose? The answer matters more than we think, because childhood isn't just about children, it's about what kind of humans we're creating and what kind of society they'll build when they grow up.